And we are back on the 0 Hour. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and it is time for that portion of the program we call Breaking the News, where producer Brad Herring and I run down the stories of the day and we talk about them. What else? So it's a talk show. So without further ado, let's find out what's going on. Brad, what's going on?
So you may have heard presidential candidate Hillary Clinton gave her long-awaited testimony before a congressional committee investigating the attack on the U.S. Embassy in Benghazi, Libya. And as we've covered on this show, the committee's work has faced criticism, largely self-inflicted, due to a wave of unfortunate honesty from members of Congress pointing that committee's intent was to take down Hillary Clinton's campaign. Do you think they're going to be successful after what you saw yesterday?
I think they gave her an enormous gift with this testimony for a variety of reasons. First of all, not only was the testimony, as you pointed out, long-awaited, the end of the testimony was long-awaited because she had to sit there for 11 hours. It was a spectacle that I think drummed up a lot of sympathy for her. It looked like a Star Chamber investigation, a kind of inquisition, and that alone, the optics of it, looked very, very bad for the Republicans. They were bullying, they were rude, they had no new information, no new thoughts. So I think they hurt themselves quite a bit. I think they helped Hillary Clinton by making her the center of attention, and B, not really coming up with any new information. Now, the one thing I would have liked to see come out is that the violence in Benghazi was an outflow of the fact that the U.S. intervened militarily in that country without any plan for what to do should they be successful. So chaos erupted there. That, of course, is not going to come up, not going to be brought up by Republicans because they like war, and it's not going to be brought up by Democrats because they don't want to be seen as helping this Star Chamber and inquisition. But believe me, I think this was a very, very good day for Hillary Clinton and a very, very bad day for the Republican Party.
And how do you think Trey Gowdy recovers in terms of his future in the Republican leadership, such as it might be?
Well, I think, the funny thing is, while I think the public in general hated the whole thing, and Trey Gowdy really strikes me like, what's his name, Inspector Javert from Les Miserables, but he just seems like the almost central casting sent him over to be the Star Chamber Inquisitor. But I think that the Republicans like that, so I think he'll probably remain popular within his own party, especially on Capitol Hill, but I doubt he has much of a future in any other kind of electoral position.
What a shame that is.
Yeah.
What a shame. So there was an interesting, let's go to this one first. In a surprise result, Justin Trudeau is going to replace Stephen Harper as Canada's Prime Minister after his Liberal Party routed the Conservatives in nationwide elections this week. The election was widely considered a referendum on Harper's 10 years in office after criticism of his governing style as too secretive and bullying, too quick to marginalize women and stereotype minorities, and too embracing of austerity and militarism. It sounds like somebody we knew here, maybe from
Yes, it does.
2008.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does. And so I think there's some truth, but I think that's half the truth. I think that, yes, Stephen Harper was a ghastly human being by all accounts, ghastly prime minister, desperately tried to save his seat by racist attacks on Muslims, among others, and racist appeals and so on. Really, really the low road, a guy who'd been on the low road for many years, dug himself a lower ditch than ever. So I think a lot of it was repudiation of Stephen Harper. But I think there's another piece of this story that is very, very important to remember, which is that, Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party was known as the centrist party, and the NDP, which for a while was leading in the polls, was the left of center party. Now, but what happened was the NDP somewhere along the line believed the hype from the centrist establishment and promised to cut deficits and emphasized spending cuts over doing what was right for the country. And by listening to that advice, they sank like a stone. Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, on the other hand, moved left. They promised to run a deficit. They promised to spend on infrastructure and jobs jobs, and ran very much to the left on foreign policy, getting Canada out of the war with ISIS and so on, and out of Syria. So I think the real lesson of Canada, besides the fact that Stephen Harper was, a terrible prime minister, was that running to the left works, and I hope that politicians in this country get the message, because Justin Trudeau on foreign policy and economics very much ran to the left and had a surprise victory.
There's a lot of talk about how this was the longest election cycle in Canada. Do you think that contributed at all, that they got to know Trudeau a little bit better than otherwise they might have?
No, I don't think so. I mean, and by the way, for context, I believe longest election cycle in Canadian history is 78 days, as opposed
it's not long.
Yeah, it's like 780 days here, literally. I mean, it's a two-plus year process here. So I'm not sure that had as much. They knew Trudeau because his father had been prime minister. The whole family is tabloid fodder there and so on. He's been a media star since he was 27 when he delivered the eulogy at his own father's funeral, or 28.
And he's a good-looking guy, so the media has been all over him in part for that.
Right, absolutely. No, he's very telegenic and so on. So I think they knew him. I think they didn't know. I think what he had the opportunity to fill in was the blank of what kind of leader he'd be, and he chose to fill that in with a leftist portrait. So that to that extent, I think maybe the length did help him.
All right, well, moving on. Interesting back and forth this week in the Republican primary. There was a lot of stick made of Jeb Bush's claims that his brother George, quote, kept us safe during his presidency. He made that point at that last debate. A lot of thought, well, maybe except that one time. He didn't keep us safe then. Current frontrunner and professional troll Donald Trump called Jeb on it, colorfully pointing out his brother was president on 9/11. After much tutting, Trump was accused of a kind of soft trutherism, insinuating that George W. Bush knew about the attacks in advance or could have somehow prevented the attacks. Fox News helpfully suggested that Trump blame Clinton instead, a favorite right-wing talking point. Let's listen to Brian Kilmeade.
You have to think about 2001 when we walked in when the president walked into his 4 years in office. Al Gore and George Bush weren't even debating Al-Qaeda, even though bin Laden declared war to us in 1996. And most of those hijackers had overstayed their visas. So unless he came in and the first thing that President Trump would have done is said, I need the CIA to talk to the FBI.
Immediately.
I need you to mix and match and merge lists and find out if there's anybody here who have overstayed their visas. That was not the talk of the country, because we were on the air at that time. And in 1996, he declared war on us. So you might be madder, Donald Trump, and we're going to ask him in an hour, at Bill Clinton for not taking a legitimate shot at somebody who declared war on us in the 90s.
Surprising nobody takes his advice on things. That was Brian Kilmeade. But Jeb actually did take that advice on Hannity's show, claiming the right-wing myth that Clinton was offered the chance to take out bin Laden and passed on it. So what do you think?
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to play a clip.
Nah.
Okay. No, look.
We don't need any more clips there.
Look, the thing about someone who's unhinged, like Donald Trump, who says terrible things and racist things and things that we rightfully loathe and condemn him for, is that lack of an internal filter also apparently allowed him to say a truth that not only no Republican but nobody in the media was allowed to say, which was that that 9/11 was George W. Bush and his administration catastrophically failing the American people and failing to keep us safe. Now, Brian Kilmeade or whomever can yammer on as much as they want to about the issue, but facts are facts, and the simple fact is this. Although she tried to conceal it from the American people, Condoleezza Rice and others in that administration received a memo entitled Bin Laden Determined to Strike in the U.S., and that administration of George W. Bush, Republican President of the United States, did nothing about it. Month after month passed. Now, we can look at many of the reasons why 9/11 happened and many of the problems of interagency communication that led to us not identifying the hijackers in time and so on, problems that predate George W. Bush, predate Bill Clinton, predate a lot of folks. But the bottom line is they had a memo that said that bin Laden was determined to strike in the U.S. It even said he was intending to use airplanes to do it. They did nothing about it. Now, if Leon Panetta told me personally many years ago, they used to meet every morning at 7:30 in that Clinton White House. He was the chief of staff there. and discussed terrorist threats, and said that when he met with his successor said, no, they weren't interested in doing that. That's also on the record. That's documented. So whatever our criticism, legitimate criticism of the Clinton White House on this issue, they took that kind of threat seriously. This administration did not, the Bush administration. They tried to cover it up. They failed. And if they're going to be cheered for their success in preventing a second one, it should be on them that they allowed the first one. Look, I think the fairest way to look at it is if they had gotten that memo, bin Laden determined to strike in the U.S. using airplanes, and someone, President Bush or someone else, Condoleezza Rice or Dick Cheney, had said, I want somebody to give me a full report on what we're doing, and I want a plan in place to prevent this from happening. If it had happened anyway, we could look back and say they took the threat seriously. They did their best. We can't blame them. They didn't take the threat seriously. They didn't do their best. We can blame them.
Yeah. So let's stick in the presidential realm. This week, the field for the Democratic primary, announced and unannounced, trimmed considerably. Jim Webb, the one-term senator from Virginia, cited his views on policies like affirmative action and the Confederate flag to claim he no longer shares the views of the Democratic Party. This is from him on Fox News back in July. The party has moved way far to the left. That's not my Democratic Party in and of itself. Which is funny since he previously left the Republican Party in 1988, also claiming that it had shifted. It has been unclear to many journalists if he was actually running for president at all, as he seemed to have almost no campaign staff and did almost no events. Today, we're recording on Friday, Lincoln Chafee also announced that he would be leaving the contest. Not much to say there, except it was reported this week that 10 people had donated to him, and I'm sure they'll be very disappointed.
Well, Jim Webb is like some rogue moon who, left the orbit of one planet and orbited around another. Now he's leaving that, and God knows where he's headed out.
He's this mythical centrist.
Right, he's out to the center of the galaxy somewhere. Yeah. God bless him. Now there's talk, he's talking about running as an independent, which would not be an earth-shattering experience, no, or a historical moment if he does. Lincoln Chafee, look, I felt sorry for the guy, to be honest with you. I don't know what possessed him to think that he could run, and I hope he's in a better place now. I don't know.
Well, he seemed to be having a great time at the debate. I mean,
I don't know.
He was living the dream.
I guess so, but okay. And speaking of dreams.
Yeah, Vice President Joe Biden made the difficult decision this week to not seek the Democratic presidential nomination in 2016. He announced the decision from the Rose Garden of the White House. This despite all of the journalists and activists who reported that he was sure to enter the race. The perpetually wrong Bill Kristol even tweeted specifics, saying that he heard that President Obama had told President Obama at lunch just the day before that he was going to run for president and that Biden was going to announce at University of Delaware, and could not have been more wrong.
Or not.
Yeah.
It is amazing when they don't just get it wrong, but they get it wrong with colorful details. Right, and he had the Caesar salad, and it's like, okay, look. I'm like a lot of people around here. I like Joe. I've never met him, but I mean, he just seems like a likable guy, and this just wasn't, as he said, it just wasn't meant to be. I have a feeling by the way that he phrased his withdrawal that he is standing in the wings in case something catastrophic happens to Hillary in terms of an investigation or something. After this week, this is less and less likely, so I think, look, my heart breaks for the guy, for the loss he's endured in his life, and he seems like a good guy. I strongly disagree with him on policy, on a number of policy issues, although I think he's shown more common sense on foreign policy than other people in the Obama administration. But all that said, God bless him, and I wish him the best.
Yeah, what do you think his role is moving forward in the Democratic Party? Is it kind of an elder statesman, or do you think he goes back to try to run for Senate or anything like that?
Well, I don't know, because it's all so personal at this point. I think he's going to have a hard time being on the sideline, but I don't know after you've been vice president and been a presidential candidate so many times if you really want to go back to the Senate. I'll tell you what I do think, actually. I do think that he is pitching himself in a way that if Hillary Clinton becomes president, or for that matter Bernie Sanders, that he sure would like a cabinet job.
Yeah, and I think he'd do well in that.
I do too.
So one more story. This one's kind of fun, and it really surprised me. I don't know if it surprised you. Let's get into it. A presidential candidate, I'm not going to say which side, penned an article this week titled, "Dear Republicans, keep your hands off Social Security." Allow me to read a passage from it. "Sadly, the establishment elites treat Social Security and Medicare like welfare benefits. This is completely unacceptable, appalling, and flat-out wrong. These are earned benefits. Seniors are getting stabbed in the back while the Washington Republican establishment tells them it's a back massage." I'm not going to ask you who it was because I'm sure you know, but that folksy bit at the end might give away the author, who's none other than Mike Huckabee, who took to FoxNews.com to attack John Kasich, although not by name, for the clip we played last week, suggesting that we have to, quote, get over it when it comes to Social Security cuts. Was this surprising to you to hear this from Mike Huckabee?
Put it this way. You know a Republican is getting desperate when they decide to tell the truth. That's a desperation move. That's right before the final bell rings. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, look, it didn't surprise me because Huckabee actually for a while he's been trying to thread the needle, but he's been he decided early on to take a more liberal position on Social Security than the other guys, or I shouldn't even say liberal, reasonable position, rational position, while at the same time trying to say, those politicians, you can't trust those, they'll rob you blind and all that. So he tried to use the rhetoric of the right, but at the same time run on Social Security. I think he might have thought it would help him with the primary voters or whatever. But, I think he's done. I don't think he has a chance. And I think it's funny that the sign of desperation for him is that he's going to tell the truth. And we talked last week about John Kasich and how terrible his remarks were. So yeah. Mike's going to try every opportunity, including the racist remarks he made recently about Koreans. So he's flailing.
Yeah, I was particularly struck by the wording that he used. You said he used the wording of the right. He also used the wording of the left quite a bit, referring to it as it is, as an earned benefit, rather than what the Republicans like to call it, which is an entitlement or a welfare system.
Yeah, the only reason why I corrected myself about that is that it's the left that's saying it now, but that's actually not the left position.
It's also the truth.
It's just a fact. Yeah, I mean, it's just call a fact the left position.
Yeah.
Well, in a sense, that's true because the left sometimes are the only ones telling the truth. But in this case, it's not left or right. It's just it is an earned benefit. That's a fact. Exactly. And the fact that Mike Huckabee is actually turning to actual truth, well, some people will try anything to get elected.
Exactly. Well, that's all we got for the week.
All right. Well, thanks so much, and we will be right back after this. I'm Richard RJ Eskow with Brad Herring in our Breaking the News segment, and this is the Zero Hour.